Greetings, comrades! According to recent public opinion polls, more than half of Russians say summer is their favorite season. But you may ask, Sergey, how can that be? After all, in summer Russian pet polar bears surely suffer from the heat. Wearing an ushanka is uncomfortable, and vodka is far from a cooling drink. What do they even do at this time of the year? Or maybe Russian summer means eternal snow? No, that's not how it is, my friends. Sit back, relax, and let me tell you how Russians spend their summers and why they love them so much. Have Russians always loved summer? Maybe it's the corrupting influence of the West. I will tell you this, they did. Let's read some Russian literary classics. Now it is summer, a lovely summer. As usual, I am overwhelmed with the joys of physical life and forget my work, wrote Leo Tolstoy. Dostoevsky dreamed of summer. I cannot live decently, I am too dissolute. If I can't swim in the summer, it's just a disaster. Ivan Bunin had slightly more complex feelings. Every summer is a cruel betrayal. So many hopes, so many plans, and before I know it, it's already over. How many of them do I have left these summers? These quotes also answer the question why. First, like everyone else, Russians enjoy relaxing in a variety of ways. I will say in advance that summer is traditionally associated with vacations for children and adults, making it the perfect time for a fulfilling, diverse escape. Secondly, in this case, stereotypes about Russia are true. Ask a foreigner what comes to mind when they hear the word Russia, and one of the first answers will likely be cold. And although snow falls rarely in some parts of the country, most of Russia is indeed a land where winter reigns supreme. That's why summer in Russia is a welcome reprieve from 9 months of snow, ice, mud and rain.
It's like a reward.
Yes, it's simply time for warmer, sunnier days. It may sound trivial, but when you live in Russia, you really start to appreciate the time of year when it doesn't get dark at 6 PM and there's no more bone-chilling wind. You might say that almost everyone who doesn't live near the equator loves summer, well, except for a special breed of people we call холодоёб in Russia, but let's not bother with that. On this channel we talk about things specific to Russia and Russian people. So what do ordinary Russian people do in the summer? You are about to find out. Since everything stems from childhood, let's start there. What is summer like for a typical child in a Russian city? Until a certain age, summer brings no joy or benefits. At first, it's just more time for playing and having fun in the yard with friends, because it stays light out longer, and in some places it never gets dark. Then, at around age 6 or 7, children receive their first tough life lesson. They are sent to elementary school. That's when he realizes his carefree life is over. Now he has to go to a strange place every day, sit through boring lessons and do other dull things. But there is a small silver lining to all this – summer. For school children in both Russia and the Soviet Union, summer breaks always lasted 3 months. 3 months of freedom! School children usually have 2 options, both of which involve traveling far from home. The first option is to get closer to nature by going to the countryside. For many parents, answering the question of where to send their children in the summer was easy. If they had older relatives in the countryside or at a dacha, they would send their children there. For any Russian child, this is literally a universal summer experience. Living for 3 months somewhere far from the hustle and bustle of the city with their grandmother and grandfather. Swimming in the river, running through the fields with friends, picking mushrooms and berries, drinking fresh milk and recharging their batteries before the next school year. Parents may or may not visit on the weekends, after all, it's a vacation for them too. But what if you don't have relatives in the countryside, like me? I had a dacha, but it was a 30-minute walk from my house, and relaxation was the last thing on my mind there. Many people like me later recalled summer dacha duty with horror. You had to plant and dig up endless potatoes, weed and water the beds, and pick berries and fruits. But let's not dwell on the sad stuff. There's another way to spend the summer. I'm talking about summer camps, the ones that were proudly called pioneer camps in the Soviet Union. In modern Russia there are fewer of them and they have become much more diverse, yet they remain popular. There are two types: school camps, which usually only operate in June and are an extension of the school program, and real camps. They are usually located far from cities, in forests, near lakes, mountains, or even by the sea if you're lucky. I have a separate video about Soviet pioneer camps, and modern Russian children's camps are still very similar to them. In short, children are gathered, divided into groups by age, and entertained in various ways for an entire session, usually 3 to 4 weeks. Honestly, introverts and extroverts have two sharply opposing opinions about summer camps. The former absolutely hated them, considering them useless, boring, and painfully long. The second group loved going to them. We were ready to spend all 3 months there with new friends and cried when their session ended. As you might have guessed, I belong to the first category. But time passes, school is over, and with it the carefree summer days. No, if you're a college student, you can still desperately cling to this summer paradise. You can go to a children's camp, not as a participant but as a counselor, and your grandmother will always be happy to see you in the village. But somehow it's not the same anymore. The vacations are shorter, and there is endless work to do in the village now. Incidentally, it was even tougher in the USSR, where people used to take potato trips in the summer. Let me explain. These were organized harvests by city dwellers, mainly students, school children, and government employees. You and your classmates, faculty or institute were sent together to a collective or state farm to harvest crops, mainly beets, carrots, cabbage, and, of course, potatoes. You were there anywhere from a couple of days to several weeks. They surely knew how to have fun in the USSR. Sometimes it was not in the summer, but in the spring or fall. However, May and September in Russia are often considered honorary summer months. We even have a special term for the period when it suddenly gets warmer at the end of September or beginning of October after the first cold spells – Women's Summer. In the US and UK it's Indian Summer, in the Netherlands After Summer, and for some reason we have Women's Summer. According to the Great Soviet Encyclopedia, Women's Summer refers to the period when fieldwork in the village ends and women take up household chores that can be done outdoors in warm weather. However, there are other versions. For example, some believe that the name of this period comes from the Pleiades constellation, which was called Baba in Russia. It could be seen in the night sky during the second half of September. Now, let's return to the harsh realities of adult life. But even here, summer isn't so bad. First, grey, dreary cities blossom with greenery and color. The air is filled with the intoxicating scent of hundreds of flowers. Second, there's nothing better than leaving work at 6 p.m. knowing there are still 4 or 5 hours of daylight left. It's like having an extra day after work. Finally, summer is vacation season. All workers in Russia are entitled to 28 or more calendar days of paid annual leave. And most people prefer to take their vacations in the summer. What can you do on vacation? You can do nothing, go to your dacha, or the most desirable option – go to the sea. A seaside vacation in Russia is something very special and almost sacred. Here's the map of Russia, a huge country washed by many seas. And here are the areas where you can lie on the beach and swim in the sea for at least a couple of months a year. Not much, is it? The Arctic Ocean? No comment. The Pacific Ocean is too far away and too cold for 95% of the population. The Baltic Sea in Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg is shallow and still cold. The Caspian Sea has some unique geographical and cultural aspects in the border regions, so it's not always possible to lie on the beach and swim. The Sea of Azov is shallow. That leaves a 250-kilometer long strip from Anapa to Sochi. And then there's Crimea with all its pros and cons. As a result, the beaches on the Black Sea are overcrowded during the summer. You have to lie on top of each other, swim in a not-so-clean sea and pay triple the price for everything. There was also an oil spill this year that left the coastline looking like this. Pessimists said it would take another 10 years to clean the beaches. June has arrived and it turns out that even oil doesn't scare people away. Because of the high cost of vacation on the Black Sea coast, many are choosing to travel to other popular destinations such as Turkey and Egypt. One reason for that is the all-inclusive system that is popular there, which just resonates with the Russian soul. For those not tempted by a beach holiday, Russia offers many alternatives. The unique ancient and deep lake Baikal, the rivers of Altai, the forests of Karelia, or a cruise on the Volga. Of course, there's also St. Petersburg with its magical white nights in mid-June, where the sun sets for just a couple of hours and it never truly gets dark. Surprisingly, despite their love for summer, Russians do not have an official summer holiday. There is, however, an unofficial one – Ivan Kupala. This colorful holiday, which has its roots in the country's pagan past, is celebrated on June 24th. On the eve of and on Ivan Kupala Day, it was customary to have fun and light bonfires. People would dance in circles, walk around the village, and sing and dance. According to popular beliefs, plants and water acquire special powers on this night. The rituals that have survived to this day are associated with three elements: fire, herbs, and water. Mass bathing took place in the water, and specially made wreaths were lowered into it. If the wreath floated down the river instead of sinking, it was believed that the girl who launched it would have a happy life. It was also customary to search for a fern that supposedly blooms only once a year, on this night. People believe that whoever found the flowering plant would become rich, gain the ability to see the future, and be able to talk to animals. Another ritual involves couples jumping over bonfires hand in hand. If their hands remain clasped after jumping, it means they will be together forever. However, this holiday is not as widespread now as it was in the old days. Nevertheless, the absence of a special holiday does not stop Russians from bringing summer joy into their lives in other ways, such as with special food. Yes, Russian cuisine changes in the summer. Heavy, hearty dishes designed to help you survive the winter are replaced by lighter fare. Soups are the first thing that comes to mind. While winter soups are hot and filling, summer soups are refreshing. The two main ones are svikolnik and okroshka. Svikolnik is a close relative of borscht, made from pre-cooked beets, potatoes and fresh cucumbers in cold beet broth. No meat or cabbage. Okroshka is even more surprising. It's a vegetable salad made with potatoes, radishes, cucumbers, eggs and meat, and it's served with a kvass or kefir dressing. It doesn't sound appetizing, but it's very refreshing in the heat. And yes, either kvass or kefir. It's an eternal debate. When it comes to drinks, it's still kvass. In Soviet times it was sold from special yellow barrels in the middle of cities. And let's not forget about the Soviet lemonade vending machines. And of course Soviet ice cream, the holy trinity of heat relief. As for drinks, there's also mors and kompot, two similar berry drinks. In kompot, the berries are boiled, while in mors they are either poured over with water or squeezed for juice. Another reason to love summer in Russia is the abundance of berries and fruits. After all, it is a northern country, so it's important to take advantage of the vitamins while they are available. Another summer staple is watermelons and melons. Toward the end of August, kiosks appear on the streets of Russian cities, overflowing with all kinds of melons and watermelons. The true taste of summer. The ability to choose a ripe fruit is a special kind of art, and as soon as you bring your prize home, the whole family will gather around the table and eat it all right away. This can truly be considered another universal Russian summer tradition. However, I personally can't stand them. Finally, the last Russian summer dish – shashlik. Admittedly, it's not technically Russian, it's originated in the Caucasus and not strictly a summer dish. Shashlik season begins on May Day. So what? Shashlik consists of pieces of fatty lamb or pork roasted on special skewers over a fire. You can use a special barbecue, mangal, or just put two bricks on the ground and heat a fire under them. The main secret though is the marinade. Every family has its own recipe passed down by word of mouth. The smell of shashlik is the main sign that summer has arrived, because you can make it anywhere. At your dacha, on the beach, at the edge of the forest, or even on your balcony if you are brave enough. Just kidding, don't do that. Hey, I've been raving about summer in Russia, but does it have any downsides? Sure, like mosquitoes and gnats, they are especially bad in Siberia, where they are like a natural disaster. Another downside is when they shut off the hot water everywhere. You've never heard of that? Many things in Russia have been centralized since Soviet times. For example, apartment buildings have centralized heating and a 24/7 hot and cold water supply. However, the system needs to be repaired from time to time. Therefore, during the summer, the hot water in apartments is turned off for a certain period of time, so that preventive maintenance and inspections can be carried out. Admittedly, it is easier to go without hot water in the summer than in the winter. This wonderful tradition still exists today, but fortunately by modern standards the water is not turned off for more than 2 weeks. But all of these are minor details that do not spoil the magic of the Russian summer. No, the main downside of summer in Russia is that it does come to an end sooner or later. Thanks for watching, and as always, a huge shout out to my biggest supporters: Yelizaveta Zakharova, Kirill, Klimuk, Böse, Jimmy Albin, Petar, Ilic, Marina Holiday, and one more member who wished to remain anonymous. See you guys next time.